Martin Lawrence is so hilarious that his funny bone has a funny bone.
What's up? What's up? What up?
He's got this vibe like he can walk into a room and folks just fall out laughing. And that's before he ever opens his mouth. The facial expressions, the comedic swag, that high-pitched voice. It all worked so well on the sitcom. Now, this was back in the 1990s, way before the Me Too movement was empowering women, but there was Martin Lawrence out here like,
You go, girl!
And think about it now. Think about that show. No cussing. And Martin Lawrence was still funny. And for sure, with all shows made for network TV, writers and producers and actors have to keep it clean. But cable TV emancipates the talent, so folks are free to fill in the blankety blanks when proclaiming punchlines.
Hold up! Hold up! Oh my goodness.
This month, when Martin Lawrence brings his comedy tour to Raleigh, North Carolina, you can rest assured that the F-bombs will be flying for real. I mean, there's even an F-bomb in the name of the tour. But how come the F in F-bomb can't just stand for funny?
There's a way to use, profanity and things like that to accentuate or to highlight something.
That's John Champion. He hosts a monthly comedy show at Bud's Tavern in Youngsville, North Carolina. I caught up with him, funny lady Janine Slaughter, and comedian Michael Miller, who on stage is Mike Mello, who's actually opened for comedian Tracy Morgan. Here's Mello.
So I'm sure at 47 you've seen Martin back in the day, the sitcom.
For sure.
I would argue he's pretty funny.
Oh yeah, he's one of the best that done it.
He ain't cussing when he does that. Yet in his stand-up, man, he'll give it to you, a few little choice words. So my question is, why does a comic make that decision if he's naturally funny, which I argue Martin is? Why make the choice to use some choice words?
It's just personality. It's who you are. Either you're being honest with yourself. I mean, we all have our choice words, right? But I think when it becomes television, of course, you can't use that. But when it's your own art or it's who you are, then you tend to be who you are when you're on stand-up, doing stand-up. I mean, I give you a few words, but I don't think I'm dirty. But I try not to be vulgar. I don't use too many cuss words, only, the natural ones that come to us when we're either frustrated or upset, something like that. But it's like I don't have to curse, but it's a raw emotion. So if that's who I am, I try to be that. If you need curse words to make the joke funny, 9 times out of 10 the joke's not funny. But if you can take those words out and it's still funny, then it's a funny joke. So that's how I base it off of. Like I have a joke where I talk about my best friend sleeping with my girlfriend, and I'm like, they're married anyway. But then when I use screw it or shucks or something like that, it doesn't give it that raw emotion. So as emotion, I'm like, like this is what it is. Instead of being like, it just doesn't feel natural when I use any other word because that's how I felt.
I'm sitting here dwelling on the cuss words, but could I very well talk about a real physical comic and say he's not very funny, so he leans on all his antics and everything? Is that the same thing as somebody who's not a good comedian will lean on cuss words?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it like that. I know a few comics that are really animated, and if they weren't, then their jokes wouldn't work. Like I consider myself kind of middle of the road. I do animated. I get animated. I can tell you stories, but they're nothing. I use them to accent certain parts, but not lean on it. Kind of give you a visual of what's going on in the joke.
Mello, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, no problem, man. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Here's John Champion.
You have to know your audience. Now, I was always taught that unless you're headlining, you can't curse. With the way the show is set up, the host, the feature, the headliner, I was always taught the headliner's the one that gets to use the bad language. Of course, times have changed. There's some audiences that don't want to hear a clean show. They want somebody to keep it real. They want something authentic. At the same time, it's a fine line. Like I said, know your audience, because I've performed places where, especially now in the climate that we live in now, it's like someone's offended by everything. So you have to be careful of your material, your subject matter. And yeah, some people do get offended by profanity.
Is it a cop-out that, do comedians cuss because their material isn't good and they can get a cheap laugh by saying some four-letter words?
It depends on the comic and their level of skill, because now Richard Pryor is my all-time favorite, all-time great. I think, and I'll tell a story, I think he used profanity in the most beautiful way. It was well thought out. There's some comedians that aren't very good, and they kind of use profanity as a punctuation, as an exclamation mark. And you can tell whenever you listen to a comic and their material isn't that great or don't have much to talk about. Now, I was going to a college, I'm not going to name the school, back in the day, and I had a class, and we had to write about storytellers or someone we thought was a great storyteller. So I wrote this paper about Richard Pryor. I said he was a griot. And I used his example. I used the example of the way he used characters and language like Mudbone. When I first moved up there, exactly. All these good characters. The way he imitated his father, and Which Way Is Up, and the way he told stories. Now, the teacher for the class, she gave me like a C on the paper, and she wrote in the punctuation was good, the grammar was good. She was upset because, in her words on this paper, how dare you say that Richard Pryor was a good storyteller? All he ever did was curse. And I thought to myself, well, how dare somebody call you a good English teacher? Because you don't understand.
This is Janine Slaughter.
Would you describe yourself as a clean comic, or you use a few choice words every now and then?
I prefer to use a few choice words quite often, but if the need for me to be clean arises, then I can do both.
You said folks have told you over the years you're funny. Yeah. I'm sure that won't all because you were using choice words. No. So why do you want to put some of those choice words into your material?
I think it's I think for one, in all honesty, I think in my material on stage, it's part of it is fillers. Cuss words are just fillers, basically. They fill, and I think they help with the nerves. But then I grew up in a house, my mother cursed a lot. I grew up in a family full of people who use profanity a lot. So I've heard it ever since an infant coming on up. So it's just become part of just my life. If you get together with my family, everybody's going to curse a lot. So it's not something that you have to do, because I realize, like, when I'm at work or talking to, I don't curse. So, it's not something that we have to do. I think it's just something we choose to do. I think people take profanity too seriously sometimes. I think they read too much into it. I hear people say, oh, if you're Christian, you shouldn't be cursing it, but to me, it's just words. For me, at the end of the day, laughter is a gift. Laughter is healing. So I feel like if I can use laughter to bring healing, and I say a couple MFs or Bs over here, that's great. And if I can go in this same room and not use those words but still bring laughter, and it brings joy and healing, then I'm happy with it either way,
Sit back, relax, and watch a true player from the Himalaya.